childhood? That is your type of family you're born into, your early education and stuff like
Okay, I was born in Omaha, Nebraska. My father worked for the Union Pacific Railroad, and I was born in 1910, and I lived in Omaha until 1917. And I don't think there was much unusual, except my father was unusually interested in automobiles, and uh, he came from a farm out in Lexington, Nebraska, about halfway across the state. And we drove out when I was about 5. We drove out in an automobile. I think one of the most interesting. I remember very well the flat tires we had
that?
and getting lost along the way. And it was a 200-mile trip, and it took us from it took us almost 14, 16 hours or something like that. It was quite an arduous trip. One of the earliest things that I remember. Then he was transferred to Chicago, and we lived in Chicago, and then Oak Park. And then we lived 1 year out in Tama, Iowa. Tama, Iowa is a little country town, but happened to be a railroad town, and he was transferred out there
Yes.
by the railroad just to get more experience. And there were a lot of Indians there because it was an Indian reservation. I remember the fun and games and so on. One of the things I remember, jumping back, 1918, we were living in Oak Park at the time of the armistice of World War One, and I can remember victory gardens and parades and um, quite a bit about armistice and excitement and so on
I was wondering how you got to. I know you had got to interior South Dakota. I was wondering.
about that. Oh yeah, I then moved to Maywood and grew up in Maywood. Went to Proviso East High School. That's when it was the town was, I suppose, even at that time, about a fifth black, because a great number of blacks had come up during World War One and lived there, but sort of isolated, and nobody ever saw them. They were in our classes at school, but they didn't take part in our social life, and they never came to any of our reunions or parties or anything like that. So they were didn't hardly knew they existed. There was no problems, of course, but they lived in a separate world. Um, High school was fun. I enjoyed it.
Was it
Not much better than an average student.
was it dra- drastically different then and now?
Actually, when I realized the content of the subjects, for instance, physics certainly must have been an awful lot easier and different than it is nowadays, or was even after World War II when I got into teaching out here. Um, we took school pretty seriously, and we did do homework. We had the standard courses, but I took 4 years of art and 4 years of mechanical drawing, in addition to 4 years of math and 3 years of science, I guess. We took more subjects, much like they're getting back to 18 hours credit. I think we must have had 18 at least hours credit required. And I thought I was going to be an architect. I was just sure I was going to be an architect. I had a bicycle. I rode over to River Forest and Oak Park, which are very close to Maywood, and a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright houses over there. And I just was sure I was going to be an architect. And I went right after college to Armour Institute, which is now Illinois Institute of Technology, and flunked my math. I just wasn't. I just wasn't prepared, and didn't study, and copied other people's homework. and it doesn't pay off. You can't do a final exam when you do that. And I learned the hard way. And the Depression came in right after that. And so I worked as a draftsman after 1 year at Armour. And then I had a very bad automobile accident and was laid up for 6 months. And when I came back, they found out they could get along without me for 6 months, so I was without a job. And I worked at our church as janitor and director of young people's work. That sounded very respectful when you applying to be a teacher. Being director of young people's work, much better than being janitor. And I was in charge of the Sunday school. I was superintendent of the Sunday school at my tender age of 23, 24.
Is that how you got involved in education to begin with?
Yes. And then when I was 25 and then I went to night school. I continued night school, taking all kinds of courses, things that led towards a degree and things like typing and shorthand, not knowing just what I was going to do. But at the end of 5 years of night school work, I had the equivalent with my work at Armour of 2 years of college, and I transferred out to Grinnell, Iowa. And Grinnell was quite a good school, and strict school, and I got along all right, and took social science and education courses, and enjoyed college thoroughly.
Did the Depression really affect you?
No. My father was not out of a job at all. And our family was not hurt in any way. I can remember something. I remember a great many tramps came to the door, or down and out, men down and out, begging for food. My mother always fed them. And I guess we got a reputation from the line because we'd have 2 or 3 a month at least for several years that would stop for a free meal. And everybody else was in the same boat or a little worse off than we were, so it didn't really hurt. When I went out to college, everybody else was working hard, working their way through college partly, and it everything's relative when everybody else in the same boat as you are. It really doesn't hurt very much. Of course, wasn't doing the kind of work I wanted to do, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do either, so that didn't it didn't hurt to have a little waiting time. Sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. But out there, I decided I wanted to be a teacher, and I was pretty sure of that before I went out there.
When you graduated, did you graduate with an education degree?
Yeah, I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts, with a major in history, and a minor in education. And then I went out to interior South Dakota. My first job was teaching in a little school, 21 kids in the school, and 105 people in the town. And it was right in the middle of the Badlands, just a short distance from Cedar Pass, which is on the main road going through.
I remember that town.
Well, you've been through there?
Yeah.
Oh, well, just 2 miles down a gravel road, a little town of Interior that is still there. And I think that railroad still runs. There's not any passenger trains, but freight trains go through there. And when I was there, a train each way in the middle of the night, a passenger train, and a train each way, a freight train in the middle of the night also. It was very unusual, even though it was right on the railroad, unusual to see a train during the daytime. And the kids would more likely at the study hall or something get up and go to the windows and watch the train go by. Even though it was a railroad town, I mean, it went through. We saw very little of them. There are several Indians, or mixed half-breeds, in the school, because we're right at the edge of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And several of my pupils lived on the reservation. Their families lived on the reservation, and they rented a room in town or some of the family would come up and rented a little house and would stay in during the week, and they'd go home to the reservation during weekends. And I went home, but back to the reservation a great many times, different kids' houses, and rode horseback and went trapping and hunting and enjoyed it thoroughly.
When you entered the army in 1942,
Yes.
where were you stationed and like what was your rank?
I had a wonderful experience in the Army. I might say the best years of my life. I was very, very lucky. I volunteered because I thought sure I was going to be drafted. Because of this accident, I was deaf in one ear. And I wanted to go to summer school. And I knew that I was due to be drafted sometime during the summer, and I didn't want to have to. So I went down to volunteer, and they pretended I was all right, and wouldn't believe me when I said I was deaf one ear. I didn't really care, and so I was a volunteer and shipped out the following morning very quickly to everybody's surprise. And I was 32 then, and they tried to find a nice place for me. They didn't think I was fit for combat or something like that. So they let me pass the typing exam so I could be a clerk typist. I couldn't pass the typing exam on the first try, so they let me alone in a room for a half hour for a 20-minute test. And I passed it the second time, and they sent me out to clerk typing school. And so I was an operations clerk for a good part of the war in a fighter group. And we went first to Baltimore, and then we went around South Africa, stopping in Rio de Janeiro, clear to Bombay, back from Bombay to Suez, after having 10 days in India at a British rest camp. And I just had what they call a cook's tour. We managed to get to all the interesting places. While we were in Egypt, our planes got so far ahead of us, fighting after the 8th Army, British 8th Army running across North Africa, that we set up as a training base. We were training pilots for desert flying, and this was then our group headquarters. And so I had time for lots of leaves. I got to Palestine, what was then Palestine, now Israel, twice, and I got to Luxor and the Valley of the Kings, and Alexandria and Cairo, and every place in the Middle East, including Syria. And then we went to Tripoli and Tunisia, and I got to see a lot of things in that area, Otto, ancient Carthage, and so on. Then we went to Italy, and we're on the slopes of Vesuvius, right near Naples. Went to the opera almost every week all winter long. By that time, I had become chaplain's assistant. They found that little line in there that I had been a church director of young people working in a church, and I didn't ask for the job as chaplain's assistant, but they drafted me for it because I had some experience, and it paid off because it was the easiest job, nicest job. Had it cheap anytime I wanted it. I took a lot of leaves, and I just covered southern Italy thoroughly, the island of Capri, both shores over on the Adriatic and back, and went to all the interesting places. Then we went up through Rome, north of Rome, got there, had long leave in Rome. Then the island of Corsica, then we flew support for southern France, went through southern France and up the Rhone Valley very fast, and spent a winter in northern France, and always in a group headquarters outfit, which was never in any danger, and so there was really nothing to worry about, but a small enough group. There were only 57 enlisted men, and about a dozen of us were college men, and we were pretty close friends. And it was a little bit like being in college, and we even put out an annual at the end of the war, just like a college class would. And then we went to Germany and stationed in Germany from VE Day, that would be in April till September, and got leaves, 10, 11-day leave to England and southwest France, and I covered it up very well and
Oh, my
enjoyed
God.
it thoroughly. I had a grand time.
Was Europe all in turmoil after the war?
Um, really, only in spots in the big cities. We were near the city of Stuttgart, and the downtown area of Stuttgart was terribly bombed out. Railroad station, all that was. We drove through there. Um, but mostly, when we had a choice, we went to places that weren't. I mean, that were nice. So that I saw all of Southwest France had never been touched by the war, and so I had a couple of lovely leaves there. So I managed to get to the nicer places. Met an awful lot of very interesting civilians, both French, German, and Italian, and but found people basically very friendly. Did things I would never dare do as a civilian. I mean, an American soldier in uniform was safest person in Europe. Nobody would dare touch us or threaten us or worry us in any way. So I hitchhiked everywhere. Um, the war experience is very good. Then immediately following the war, I went back to the University of Chicago, where I had done some summer school work and got my master's degree, and came to Palatine High School.
Yeah, how did you
I
come to
applied
Palatine?
through the university's placement bureau, and Mr. McElroy, who was superintendent, hired me right after graduation. I graduated in August and started work the following week in Palatine.
Were you hired as a teacher or?
I was hired as a teacher, and then there I majored in education and guidance, and took quite a little social science. We were allowed to have a combined degree, so that even though we were only a school of 250, they wanted trained consular. So I was part-time consular and part-time history teacher, social science and history teacher, and remained that way for 5 years or so. I started the first art class they had. I'd always been interested in art. I had 4 years of art in high school and a year of architecture, which includes quite a little art. So that they had no art teacher, so I taught a course in art appreciation for about 15 years. For quite some time, that was the only thing I was teaching as full-time guidance, except for the one class in art appreciation. Eventually, as director of guidance, I had to give that up. Then I started teaching in night school, art appreciation and Chicago architecture and architecture appreciation. And I continued that for another 15 years until I retired.
What was Palatine High School like in the 40s?
Okay, in the 40s, with about 250 people there, our classes were, in general, fairly small. I don't think I ever had a class more than 20, 25. And we offered just Latin and Spanish and languages. And we didn't have fourth year math, I don't think, at first. But we did have physics and chemistry and biology and general science. And we had some shop courses and some home economic courses and pretty good facilities for the times. And we had good guidance program all the time. We had part-time guidance people for some little while before we went to full-time guidance people. We had lots of parties, and there was a lot of school spirit, and everybody went to games. The fact the Palatine Public Library is closed on Friday nights now amazes people, but that was because in the old days everybody went to the basketball game on Friday night. There would be nobody left to go to basketball. mean, to go to the library. This strange hangover. Very few people probably would do it today. But we had a small gym and small balcony, but it was always jammed for our games. We had good turnout.
Who did you play?
Mostly the towns north of here, Fox Lake, Antioch, Lake Zurich, Barrington. They were in our conference. Arlington Heights we always played, but they weren't in our conference, but we always played them and everything. And we had always had strong track teams, and the Palatine Relays were going strong. Of course, they'd been started long before I came. They were the first ones really in the state, and they had great reputation, and we bring in great crowds. The biggest relays, I think, in the state for a long time, and it was a big event putting on the Palatine Relays. Every teacher helped, even people who didn't know anything about track judged events and took tickets. And the home ec girls helped the cafeteria women cook, and cheerleaders sold popcorn, and it was a big event. There was, of course, Queen of the Relays and the attendants. And the relays probably were bigger than homecoming, although homecoming was another big event. That was in the fall. Homecoming was a big event, always a big parade with very elaborate floats. Chicken wire with tissues stuck in the almost universally. And always started out with a snake dance through town. And for years I led the snake dance. And as a whole group would join hands, and we'd have 200 kids. And we'd go from the old high school uptown, and there was a theater, and we'd go in the theater, down one aisle, across the front, back out the other aisle, all 200 of us in line. And nobody objected. They expected it. And one teacher turned his ankle, and they kind of thought it was dangerous. Eventually they stopped it. And crossing the railroad tracks at night, too, wasn't too sensible, probably. And we had a bonfire following that, and skits at the bonfire. And then we got to have the bonfire was impractical. There was no place for it, and it was kind of hard to put on skits or stunts or so on, so that we switched to a royal rally, an inside rally instead of a bonfire.
When was this?
That would be in mid 50s, almost to 1960. Probably by that time we were having very elaborate rallies, and the faculty always put on a one skit, and the different classes put on skits, and then after a while it was just the cheerleaders and the faculty, and the band, of course, and pom-pom. But as long as I was there, the faculty were putting on very outrageous skits. One time, the theme of the parade, homecoming, was movies, and so the faculty made a movie. They came to my house here and made an old-fashioned melodrama, filmed it well, lots of spotlights and so on, and we showed that for our skit. We still have King and Queen of Finks Day. I think I just read that this last fall. You still have the faculty are the Finks,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they still are doing that. That had started before I left, King and Queen of Finks.
What were the major student problems being counselor? Might be familiar in the 1940s.
We didn't have drugs. We had alcohol problem. We occasionally had kids come to a dance Not a great deal. I don't think it's probably as serious as I know it's not as serious as it became later. I don't know how serious it is now, but yeah, it existed as a problem of some little degree. But um, faculty came to dances quite generally, and the prom was a big event, and I suppose half the faculty and their wives or their girlfriends came to the prom. We had dinner dances, very elaborate dinner dances for the prom, down at the Edgewater Beach Hotel or at the Medina Country Club or Morrison Hotel or other places, and they were quite elaborate. We raised our money for these by newspaper drives, collecting old newspapers. When I first came, they would get a box car and have it on a siding at the railroad for a couple of days, and each homeroom would collect um, newspapers and store it in a garage or a barn. There were a lot of barns in town when I first came, and one day they let me, because I was class sponsor, and a couple of senior kids, boys, go to all the barns and pick up the newspaper, take it to the boxcar where we loaded it. Got a day off school doing that, and sold that for several $1,000s, which was spread around the homerooms, helped a lot, and most of it went in towards eventually the class prom. School spirit was quite good. I say almost everybody went to games and took part. Were very serious, and athletics were pretty important. We had other clubs too, and they were doing a pretty good
Yeah,
job.
were there many other clubs?
There were quite a few. Of course, very few kids worked. Um, it wasn't that they didn't want to, but there wasn't a place for them to work. I mean, we didn't have the restaurants and the places, and so not too many kids worked, and so it was easy to have after school activities. It was the picture is quite different. We had movies. Oh, we had always had at least 3 plays each year. The senior class play, which only seniors could be in, the junior class play, and then a dramatic club play. And you had to be a member of the dramatic club to be in that, so there was no free tryouts for plays as there are now. And they put on quite elaborate productions. For us, it seemed very elaborate. We thought we were just
What
all
about
out.
what about like policies, school policies for tardiness and misbehavior? Were they drastically changed?
Yes, they were definitely much stricter. Girls were not allowed to wear slacks for a long time, and then only in the winter when they rode the bus and had to wait for a bus, when they got to school, they had to take their slacks off. They didn't wear them under the dress. And one time there was length of the dresses got kind of short. There was the requirement they had to be a certain length. And one time we had some wild haircuts, and we suspended the kid who got a mohawk. I happened to be assistant principal for several years. Over about 6 years, I was assistant principal, still doing the other work. I wasn't too much. And the principal's son, the principal's out of town. The principal's son got a mohawk haircut, which is on this strip down here. And he and another kid, and I suspended them until they got it corrected, which meant shaving their hair off. And school was pretty strict. There was you'd never be in the hall um, between classes without, well, dryer emergency. And there was much more order, quiet. had study halls, and people had to study. Some of the study halls were noisy naturally, but they tried to keep them quiet. So most of the time, they were quite successful. They had to stay in school the full day, and nobody graduated early. And most classes expected homework, but most people had two study halls. And or if you're carrying extra subjects, you only have one study hall. Everybody had one study hall at least, so there was a chance to.
Were the teaching techniques different?
I suppose yes, yes, there would be far less committees or far less independent projects. Not that they were unheard of, but there was far more traditional type of teaching. Varied a great deal. Some teachers never had discipline, of course, and some teachers had strict discipline. That would expect that. The kids soon found out which were which.
Yeah. Were the sexes separated during the gym classes?
Oh yes, yes. It was first time they ever got together. Must have been almost 1960 when they had um, dancing, and that was what a job it was to get the boys to some of the boys to go in a mixed gym class and have dancing. Of course, they were in street clothes. I mean, it was yeah, no mixture in gym classes or in all other ways. There would be no off-color, what I would call off-color jokes or talk or so on. Sex was much less evident in speaking or in any other way than it is today. It became before I left you, of course.
What were your main functions? What were the main functions of the guidance department?
Help kids pick the courses for the following year. Help kids choose a career or college, and help them with personal problems, which didn't happen too often. I mean, we were available, sometimes did, and we didn't do much in the way of group guidance. We did quite a bit of it at one time. I don't think they're doing it much anymore, but at one time there was a 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot of movement towards group guidance, and we had homerooms in which we did group guidance and so on. That came and left.
What about the 1950s? What changes occurred between the 40s and 50s?
Well, I think of dances. Of course, the girls were wearing their gray felt skirts with poodle dogs on them, and jitterbugging was very much in style. And we had live music for most of the dances. We had a lot of dances. We had to have a dance a month practically. We had one thing I want to mention is we had very, very elaborate Christmas parties in the Christmas holidays. They were extremely elaborate. Disguised the girls' gym as a ski resort or as underwater, and use paper on the walls from floor to ceiling, and false ceilings with sky and stars. And one time we had the cafeteria was set up as a nightclub. Of course, lots of crepe paper. Crepe paper was used for all kinds of decoration, just acres of crepe paper, or miles, I should say, of streamers. And one time we had the cafeteria in the old building, which was some little distance from the girls' gym. That was set up as a nightclub and very elaborately decorated. Then we decorated the corridor, which was a half a block long, down to the girls' gym. Then the girls' gym was elaborately decorated, and they would spend a couple weeks decorating. But big, big thing is the most Christmas vacation. Very, very, and big bands, and serve supper at midnight and have cafeteria women serve supper. All out. You can imagine the amount of enthusiasm and time that went in on that thing. Till eventually they got killed just by overdoing. I mean, the point is it became too much of a job to want to do it anymore. But there were all kinds of parties. Um, start out in the early years, maybe the first 5 to 8, maybe 10 years, there would be a freshman initiation party in which there would be stunts, and the freshmen would be hazed, and they were pretty good at restricting hazing just to the party, though there would be some of it before that. The occasion sit a boy on a drinking fountain and get his pants wet. Some throw a boy or girl in the opposite sex washroom or something like that. But most of that happened at the party. The different clubs gave parties. The different classes gave parties. Most of them were in the nature of dances, though sometimes the Latin Club always had a banquet. The Latin Club banquet was a big event. They all came dressed in togas and sat on the floor, and we put the tables up on cement blocks about that high so you'd get your legs underneath them, and they served kind of food that would have served at that time. And very important to get the right kind of food, and to know the names of the food in Latin and so on. And I was an honorary member of the Latin Club, so I went for years for that. And for the first 10 years or so, while we could all fit in Cutting Hall, that was the auditorium, we had an assembly every month. And everybody went, of course, everybody could fit in, and everybody went to the assembly. Some of the assemblies would be pep rallies, and different clubs sponsored different assemblies. And we had outside speakers, entertainment. The school board paid for. We had some pretty good lecturers and some music groups. And at least once a month we had an assembly. That was an important thing. And eventually, it was not just the fact that we outgrew the auditorium, but during movies, dark and so on, behavior got kind of bad, to the point that it was beginning to be an ordeal for the teachers, and it was easier to drop them, so we dropped them. I hadn't been in assembly for years.
Were those things you were talking about before? What time? Like 50s?
Yes, in the 50s. By town grew very rapidly, and before they built Fremd, we were just bursting at the seams in Palatine High School, and too crowded to have assemblies, and we so crowded that so many kids that there became less fun or parties. We still had a lot of parties, but they were more formal and they were less spontaneous. There weren't as many picnics and things like that, perhaps. Then after Fremd was built, and we built our first edition, that'd be in the 1950s, early 1950s, we had a lot of extra room. And we rented rooms to the grade school one year. and we took in Northbrook that had torn down their school and were going to be 1 year without a school building. So 200 kids were bussed over from Northbrook and joined Palatine High School for 1 year, and their best teachers came with them, so they wouldn't lose them. And that was that was a wonderful year. And of course, we won all the conference championships in every sport practically because the best of them, and those who they were Palatine students, and those who graduated that year graduated from Palatine High School. And the year they went back to Glenview, then Glenview took over after Northbrook had been reorganized. Then the other schools gradually came into the picture, and we grew larger, and it wasn't quite as personal. Many more people. You don't know everybody. Nobody knew everybody. When I first came to town for some little while, I knew every high school age kid in town. And if I had to go uptown and see somebody that was high school age that I didn't know, why, they would be either a visitor in town, or there were a few kids in Inverness that went to private school, prep schools, and they might be home on a vacation or something like that. That's the only way to see anybody I wouldn't know.
Was the curriculum different?
We just had the two languages, and we had less in the fields of home ec, and there were fewer subjects. At one time, we had added Russian, which didn't go over. We added French before that, which lasted. We added German, and it lasted. We dropped Latin. They got several more math classes because kids now start accelerated math program where they get what would have been a fifth-year math for us. And yeah, there's quite a few changes. There were no special education courses, no DE or Hero or anything of that nature at all. Nothing at all.
When did that come in?
In a small way, about 1965, I think we had a DE program, and it didn't work too well. It was dropped, and maybe around the 70s before we had a great deal.
Were the problems different from the 40s, or were they more or less the same type of thing?
Many of them would be the same. We had pregnant girls and married students, the problems of students being married back when they were in little tiny school. Fact is that is even true out in interior South Dakota. The first graduating class I had, half the girls were pregnant. The other girl wasn't. So I've known about that problem for all along. Many problems stay the same, and there's been drinking has been a problem. Drugs are something that's come very seriously into the picture 10, 12 years ago at first. Although there was some before that, but it became more serious. Kids demanding their rights became fairly popular in the 60s. We had one revolution, one rebellion. A group of kids tried to organize a strike, or the mob. They're going to have a mass meeting in the gym, and they started swarming towards the gym, and I stopped them. I happened to be the one on the scene, and I think I stopped them. But very quickly, other teachers got there and it cooled down. There was a suspension or two from that, and an underground newspaper at one time that along about that time that said things that weren't nice. I think they just suspended a couple of people. Nobody appealed to the American Civil Liberties Union. They might have, maybe this was before, just before they got more student rights. The administration has bent and changed with demands of students. Um, Reluctantly, but they did. They changed. They eased up a great deal as students demanded not to have to sit in study halls. They had open study hall. Eventually, you could leave the campus. Eventually.
When did they first begin those things?
Those were late 60s, early 70s. And they spread, late 60s. Vietnam time.
Yeah.
And we were just a little behind the colleges in the revolt and demands for freedom. And we had it all, but to a smaller extent than most colleges.
In the 50s, were the again the girls and the boys separated still? When did they stop?